The Monday after the Loskus' dinner party, Darla tracked me down at school and forced Bryce Losky back into my brain. Jules, whoa girl, wait up. How have you been? I'm fine, Darla. How are you? No, seriously, she whispered. You doing okay? She shifted her backpack and looked over her shoulder. I got tough thinking, especially since you've got that soft spot for him. Who told you that? Like I haven't got eyes. Come on, girl. It's a given. Which is why. And I'm worrying about you. What? Are you seriously all right?
Yes, I am.
But thanks for thinking about me. I eyed her and said, and Darla, I believe that my Baron walked out. It's not a given anymore. She laughed. How long's this diet gonna last? It's not a diet, I've just lost my taste for him. She looked at me skeptically. Well, I have. But thanks for, caring. All through first period, I was still feeling strong and right and certain. But then, Mrs. Simmons ended the lesson a full 15 minutes early. You mean it's not a quiz? She ticked through the stack, counting ballots as she spoke. It is like a quiz in that I don't want you conferring with one another. End quiz. She slapped a set of ballots down on the first desk. I will collect them from you individually when the bell rings, and I will inspect to see that you have complied. Do not put your name on it, and do not discuss your choices with your neighbors. Do not, I repeat, do not fold your bio. Robbie Castanon raised his hand and blurted out, why do guys have to vote? It's lame to have guys vote. Robbie, Mrs. Simmons warned. Seriously, what are we supposed to do? Vote for our friends or our enemies? A lot of people snickered, and Mrs. Simmons scowled, but ahead a point. 20 of the school's 8th grade boys would be made to pack a picnic lunch for 2 and be auctioned off to the highest bidder. Being the Bastket boys in honor, Mrs. Young. Simmons began, who was interrupted by Robbie. It's a joke, he said. It's embarrassing. Who wants to be a basket boy? All the guys around him muttered, not me, but Mrs. Simmons cleared her throat and said, you should want to be one. It's a tradition that has helped support the school since it was founded there. Have been generation after generation of basket boys helping make this campus what it is today. It's why we have flower beds. It's why we have shade trees and a grove of apple trees. Visit another junior high sometime and you'll begin to realize what a little oasis our campus really is. All this from the sweat and blood of basket boys, Robbie grumbled. Mrs. Simmons sighed. For now, please just vote for Weaver you think will earn a high bid. And class, she added, we're down to 9 minutes. The room fell quiet. And as I read down the list of over 158th grade boys, I realized that to me, There hadn't ever been one boy. To me, there had only been Bryce. I didn't let myself get sentimental. I had liked him for all the wrong reasons, and I certainly wasn't going to vote for him now. But I didn't know who else to vote for. I looked at Mrs. Simmons, who was egoring the class between glances at the clock. What if I didn't choose anybody? What if I turned it in blank? She'd give me detention. That's what. So with 2 minutes left to go, I put dots next to the boys I knew who weren't jerks or clowns, but were just nice. When L was through, there were all of Ken names with dots. And of those, L circled 5, Ryan Knoll, Vince Olson, Adrian Iglesias, Lon Lai, and John Trulock. They wouldn't make Basket Boy, but then I wouldn't be bidding, so it didn't really matter. At the bell, landed over my ballot, and forgot all about the auction. Until lunchtime the next day, that is. Darla cut me off on my way to the library and dragged me over to her table instead. "Have you seen the list?" she asked. Care list. The problem, which he tries to play a dry. You didn't see that temple? With how careless. Who had voted for him? Out of 150 names, he must have gotten a lot of votes. Suddenly, whilst picturing a swarm of girls waving stacks of cash in the booster ladies' faces as they begged to have lunch with him, I threw the list back at Darla and said, "Was not my main dish. As a matter of fact, I didn't even vote for him." "Oh, girl, you are sticking to your diet." "It's not a diet, Darla. I'm over him, okay? I'm glad to hear it, 'cause rumor is that Binbet Shelley Isleready staking her claim on him." Shelley Stalls? I could feel my cheeks flush. "That's right." Darla waved her list in the air, calling Liz, Macy, "Over here. I've got the list." Darla's friends fell all over themselves getting to her and pored over the paper like it was a treasure map. Macy cried, Chad Ormond's on it. "He is so cute." "I'd go $10 on him. Easy." "And Denny's on it too," Liz squealed. "That boy is," she shivered and giggled, "Pinine." Macy's top lip. "John Trulock. How did he get on this list?" For a moment, I couldn't believe my ears. I snatched the paper out of Macy's hand. "Are you sure?" "Right there," she said, pointing to his name. "Who do you suppose voted for him?" "The quiet girls, I guess," Darla said. "Me, I'm more interested in my Gabanito." "Have I got any competition?" Macy laughed. "If you're in, I'm out." "Me too," said Liz. "Well, about you?" Darla asked me. "Bring in spare change?" "I'm not bidding." "Not on anyone." She laughed. "Bid for you." That afternoon I rode home. I rode from school brooding about Bryce and the whole Basket Boy auction. I could feel my... But why should I care if Shelley liked him? I shouldn't even be thinking about him. When I wasn't thinking about Bryce, I was worrying about poor John Truick. Jole was quiet, and I felt sorry for him. Having to clutch a basket and be auctioned off in front of the whole student body. What had I done to him? But as I bounced up our drive, Basket Boys bounced right out of my mind. Was that green I saw poking out of the dirt? Yes. Yes, it was. I dropped the bike and got down on my hands and knees. The wear so thin, so small, so far apart. They barely made a difference in the vastness of the black dirt. And yet, there they were, pushing their way through to the afternoon sun. I ran in the house, calling Mom. Mom, there's grass. Really? She emerged from the bathroom with her cleaning gloves and a pail. I was wondering if it was ever going to spring up. Well, it has. Well, come and see. She wasn't too impressed at first. But after I made her get down on her hands and knees and really look, she smiled and said, "They're so delicate. They look like they're yawning, don't they?" She cocked her head a bit and looked a little closer. Like they're sitting up in their little bed of dirt with their arms stretched way high, saying, "Good morning, world." She laughed and said, "Yes, they do." I got up and uncoiled the hose. "I think they need a wake-up shower, don't you?" My mom agreed and left me to my singing and sprinkling. And completely lost in the joy of my little green blades of new life when I heard the school bus rumble to a stop up on Collier Street. Bryce? This name shot through my brain, and with it came a panic I didn't seem able to control. Before I could stop myself, I dropped the hose and dashed inside. I locked myself in my room and tried to do my homework. Where was my peace, everyone? Where was my resolve? Where was my sanity? Had they left me because Shelley Stalls was after him? Was it just an old rivalry making me feel this way? I had to get past Bryce and Shelley. They deserved each other. Let them have each other. But in my heart, love knew that, just like the new grass, I wasn't strong enough yet to be walked on. And until I was, there was only one solution. I had to stay away from him. I needed to rope him out of me life. So I closed my ears to the news of Basket Boys and steered clear of Bryce at school. And when I did happen to run into him, I simply said hello like he was someone I barely even knew. It was working too. I was growing stronger by the day. Who cared about auctions and Basket Boys? All didn't. Friday morning I got up early, collected what few eggs there were in the coop, watered the front yard, which was by now definitely green, ate breakfast, and got ready for school. But as I was running a brush through my hair, I couldn't help thinking it was auction day. She'd probably been up since 5, making her hair into some impossibly healthy do. So what? I told myself. So what? But as I was throwing on my windbreaker, I eyed my money tin and hesitated. What if? No. No. I ran to the garage, got my bike, and pushed out of the driveway, and I was in the street, and on my way when Mrs. Stubbe flew rigging my path. Juliana, she called, waving her hand through the air. Here, dear. Take this. I'm so sorry. It's taken me this long to get it to you. I keep missing you in the mornings. I didn't even know how much she owed me. At that moment, I didn't care. All I knew was the top bill in her hand was a 10, and it was striking terror in my heart. Mrs. Stubbe, please. I don't want that. You don't have to pay me. I nonsense, child. Of course I'm going to pay you. Holiday, she said, and waved it out for me to take. No, really. Elle? I don't want it. She wedged it in the pocket of my jeans and said, "What utter nonsense. Now go. Go buy yourself a rooster," then hurried back up her walkway. Mrs. Dancy. Stubbe? Mrs. Stubbe? I called after her. I don't want a rooster. But she was gone. All the way to school, Mrs. Stubbe's money was burning a hole in my pocket and another in my brain. How much was it? When I got to school, I parked my bike and broke down and looked. 10, 15, 16, 17, 18. I folded the bills together and slid them back into my pocket. Was it more than Shelley had? All through first period, I was furious with myself for event thinking it. All through second period, I kept my eyes off of Bryce.
But oh, because
It was so hard. I'd never seen him in a tie and cufflinks before. Then, at break, I was at my locker when Shelley Stalls appeared out of nowhere. She got right next to me and said, "I hear you replanned by bid on him." What? I took a step back. Who told you that? I am not. Someone said they saw you with a whole wad of cash this morning. How much do you have?
It's none of your business, and I'm not bidding, okay?
I don't even like him anymore. She lot, oh, that'll be the day. It's true. I slammed my locker closed. Go ahead and waste your money on him. That feeling carried me clear through to 11 o'clock when the entire student body assembled in the gymnasium. I was not going to bid on Bryce Losky. No way. Then the Bastket boys came out on the stage. Bryce looked so surprising, all holding a picnic basket with red and white checked napkins speaking out from either side, and the thought of Shelley Stalls flipping going at those napkins into her lap nearly made the bills in my pocket burst. Darla came up behind me and whispered, "Rumor is you've got to wad of cash. Is that true?" "What?" "No." Yes, but I'm not bidding." "Ooh, girl. Look at you. You feeling all right?" I wasn't. I felt sick to my stomach and shaky in the knees. Time flying. She looked from me to the stage and back to me. It felt like I was having a panic attack. I couldn't breathe. I felt lightheaded and wobbly, like I wasn't in control of my own body. Darla said, "Maybe you should sit down." "I'm fine, Darla, I'm fine." She frowned at me. "I think I'll stick around to make sure." The Booster Club president, Mrs. McClure, Miss 7.2 was willing to be set on the middle of the building, because building wasn't able to begin. I'd never seen 600 kids quiet down so fast. I guess Mrs. McClure hadn't either, because she smiled and said, "Why?" "Thank you very much." And then she said, "Welcome to the 52nd annual Basket Boy auction. I know that your teachers have gone over the procedures with you in homeroom. Left you a wish to place a bid. You must raise your hand high. Bidding without raising your hand is prohibited. And should you decide to be a funny guy, you will be caught and detained or suspended. Are we all clear on that?" "Good." She looked from one side of the gym to the other. "Teachers, I see that you are in position." 600 heads turned slowly from side to side, looking at the block. "And as you're aware, winners and their basket boys have the rest of the school day off and are exempt from tonight's homework in all classes." She smiled out of the blockade. "Teachers, we appreciate your support on this." "All right then." She put on her reading glasses and looked at A3 by 5 card. "Our first basket has been brought by Jeffrey Bishop." She looked over her glasses at him and said, "Come on up, Jeffrey." "Don't be shy. Jeffrey has brought a scrumptious lunch consisting of chicken salad sandwiches, oriental noodles, baby grapes, iced tea, and fortune cookies." She smiled at him over her glasses. "Sounds delicious." Which, she said, looking back at the crowd, Jeffrey is. He enjoys skateboarding, skiing, and swimming, but ladies, he also enjoys a day in the park and watching Humphrey Bogart movies. "I think her name's Tiffany," she said. "She's a 7th grader." "Really?" "Wow. I would never have bid last year." And, don't remember bids going up that high either. Darla eyed me. "Which tells me that maybe you would bid this year. How much you got?" I looked at her and almost dissolved right on the spot. "Darla, I didn't bring money on purpose. My neighbor made me take it on the way to school because she owed it to me for eggs. And for eggs. Oh, like Bryce was talking about in the library." "Exactly." And I looked at her, looking at me, and stopped cold. "How can you even think about bidding on that boy?" I don't want to. But I've liked him for so long. Darla, I've liked Dim since Lee was 7.
And even though I know he's a coward and as meek, and I should never speak to him again, I'm having trouble focusing on that.
Especially since Shelley Stalls is after him. And now I've got this money burning a hole in my pocket. Oh, I can understand the bit about Shelley Stalls, but if you know that boy's just a big piece of fluffy cheesecake that you're gonna regret eating, I can help you with your diet. I'll hold it for you. No! No? I mean, I can handle this. I've got to handle it. She shook her head. Oh, girl. I'm hurting for you here. I looked back at the stage. The auction was happening so fast. They'd be at Bryce in no time. As the bidding continued, the battle in me head got louder and fiercer. What was I going to do? Then suddenly, the gym fell quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. And standing next to Mrs. McClure, looking completely mortified, was John Trulick. Mrs. McClure was scouring the crowd with her eyes, looking very uncomfortable too. What happened? I whispered to Darla. No one's bidding. She whispered back. Do I hear 10? Called Mrs. McClure. Come on out there. This lunch is delicious. Strawberry tarts, roast beef, and Moonster cheese sandwiches. Oh no. I can't believe I did this to him.
You?
What did you do? I voted for him. Well, you couldn't have been the only one. But why isn't anyone bidding on him? Lays. So nice. Darla nodded. Exactly. That's when I realized what I had to do. My hand shot into the air, and I called 10. 10. Warbled Mrs. McClure. Did I heart you? I put my hand up higher and said to Darla, what? Say 12. I'll outbid you.
No way. Darla!
He can't go for 10? Come on. 12, Darla called, but her hand didn't go up very high. 15, I cried. 16, called Darla and eyed me with a laugh. I whispered, Darla, I've only got 15. Her eyes got enormous. I laughed and called 18 and held her arm down and said, but that really is all I've got. There was a moment of silence and then 18 going once, 18 going twice. Sold. For $18. Darla laughed and said, whoa, girl, in a rush. I nodded. Yes, there was. Well, no dessert for you. Looks like you got cleaned out by something a little more nutritious. She nodded toward the stage. You gonna go up to the table like you're supposed to? Or you gonna stick around and see the carnage? I almost didn't have a choice. Before Mrs. McClure could say the words about Bryce or his basket, Shelley called 10. Then from the middle of the gym came, Miranda, come on. Miranda, come on. Shelley's got it. $62 going once, cried Mrs. McClure, but before she could say, going twice. A voice from the back, off the gym, called 100.
Everyone gasped and turned around to see who had called the bid.
Darla whispered, "It's Jenny." "Atkinson?" I asked. Darla pointed, right over there. She was easy to spot, standing tall above the others in the number 7 basketball jersey she almost always wore. "He cares." I giggled. She slam-dunked Shelley. Mrs. McClure was gushing into the microphone about their cord-breaking bid when a big commotion broke out over by Miranda. I spotted Shelley's hair, and my first thought was that there was going to be a fight. But instead, Shelley and Miranda turned Tophus Mrs. McClure and called "Warn 2250. I choked down a cry. "What?" "They're teaming up," Darla whispered. "Oh, no, no, no." I looked over Jenny's way. "Come on, Jenny." Darla shook her head and said, "She's through," and she was. Bryce went to Shelley and Miranda for $122.50. It was a little strange, meeting up with John, then walking over to the multi-purpose room for lunch. But he was just so nice, and I feel grateful that I bid, that by the time we got situated at our table, wasn't feeling so awkward or silly. It was just lunch. Things would have been easier if they hadn't seated me in direct view of Bryce and his little hair. But I did my best to ignore them. John told me all about this radio-controlled air. He told me a funny story about soldering the wires wrong and practically starting a fire in their basement, and asked him about how a radio-controlled airplane works, because I didn't really understand it. So I'd relaxed a lot and was actually having a good time eating lunch with John. And I was so relieved that I hadn't bid on Bryce.
What a fool I would have made of myself.
Watching Shelley and Miranda fawning all over him didn't bother me nearly as much as like it would. Really, they look ridiculous. John asked about my family. So I was telling him about my brothers and their band when a huge commotion broke out over at Bryce's table. Suddenly, Shelley and Miranda were rolling on the floor like an enormous fur ball, smearing each other with food. Out of nowhere, Bryce appeared at our table. He grabbed my hand, pulled me a few feet away, and whispered, "Do you like him?" I was stunned. He held my other hand and asked again, "Do you like him?" "You mean John?" "Yes." I can't remember what I said. He was looking into my eyes, holding my hands tight, and then he began pulling me toward him, and my heart was racing, and his eyes were closing, and his face was coming toward mine. Right there, in front of all the other basket boys and their dates and the adults, he was going to kiss me. To kiss me. I panicked. I'd been waiting all my life for that kiss, and now I yanked free and ran back to my table, and when I sat down, John whispered, "Did he just try to kiss you?" I turned my chair away from Bryce and whispered, "Can we please talk about something else?" "Anything else?" People were whispering and looking my way, and when Shelley Stalls came back from cleaning up in the washroom, everyone fell quiet. Her hair looked awful. It was sort of oiled to her scalp and still had little chunks of food in it. She glared at me so hard it looked like she was trying to get laser beams to shoot from her eyes. A couple of adults steered her back to her seat, and then everyone started whispering double speed. And Bryce didn't even seem to care. I kept trying to come over and talk to me, but I'd either get intercepted by a teacher or I'd dash away from him before he'd a chance to say anything. When the dismissal bell finally rang, I said a quick goodbye to John and bolted out the door. I couldn't reach my bike fast enough. I was the first one off campus, and I pedaled home so hard, it felt as though my lungs would burst. Mrs. Stubbe was out front, watering her flower bed, and she tried to say something to me, but I just dropped my bike in the driveway and escaped into the house. I certainly didn't want to talk about roosters. My mother heard me slamming doors and came to check on me in my room. Juliana. Juliana. What's wrong? I flipped over on my bed to face her and wailed. I am so confused. I don't know what to think or feel or do. She sat down beside me on the bed and stroked my hair. Tell me what happened, sweetheart. I hesitated, then threw my hands up in the air. He tried to kiss me. My mother struggled not to let it show, but underneath her composed expression was a growing smile. She leaned in a little and cast, "Who did?" "Bryce," she hesitated. "But you've always liked him." The doorbell rang and rang again. My mom started to get up it. I grabbed her arm and said, "Go get that." The bell rang again, and almost right after that, there was a loud knocking at the door. "Mom, don't get it. That's probably him." But sweetheart, I was over him. Completely over him. Since when? Since last Friday. After the dinner. If he had vanished from the face of the earth after our dinner at the Loskas, I wouldn't have cared. Why? Why? Did something happen at the dinner that I don't know about? I threw myself back onto my pillow and said, "It's too complicated, Mom. I just can't talk about it." She said after a moment, "Don't you sound like my teenager?" "I'm sorry," I whimpered, because I knew I was hurting her feelings. I sat up and said, "Mom, all those years I liked him? I never really knew him. All I knew was that he had the most beautiful eyes I'd ever seen, and that his smile melted my heart like the sun melts butter. But now I know that inside he's a coward and a sneak. So I did beg it to get over what he's like on the outside." My mother leaned back and crossed her arms. "Well, at last," she said, "I shouldn't really discuss it."
Why not? Because
I just shouldn't. Besides, I can tell there are things you don't feel comfortable discussing with me. We stared at each other a moment. Neither was saying a word. I looked down and whispered. When Chet and Elle were fixing up the yard, Lay must have told the rest of the family because the day before the Loskis' dinner party, I overheard Bryce and his friend making cracks about Uncle David at school. And she didn't know. It was fine that you talked about him. Because you're not a secret. You're not a secret. You're not a secret. And you're so happy to anything. And now, I sat up a little. Wait, how did you know? Patsy told me. I blinked at her. She did? Before the dinner? No. After. She hesitated, then said, Patsy's been over several times this week. She's going through a very rough time. How come? Mom let out a deep breath and said, I think you're mature enough to keep this inside these four walls, and I'm only telling you because I think it's relevant. I held my breath. Mr. and Mrs. Losky? I don't understand. Very quietly, my mother said. What about? Mom sighed. Your dad said he'd call if was working overtime, and that's probably him. While she was gone, I remembered what Chet had said about someone he knew who had never learned to look beneath the surface had he been talking about his own daughter. And how could this happen to her after 20 years of marriage? When my mother came back, I absently asked, is Dad working late? That wasn't Dad, sweetheart. It was Bryce. I sat straight up. Now he's calling. I have lived across the street from him for 6 years, and he's never once called me. Now, is he doing this because he's jealous? Of whom? So I gave her the blow-by-blow, beginning with Mrs. Stubbe, going clear through Darla, the auction, the furball fight, and ending with Bryce trying to kiss me in front of everybody. She clapped her hands and positively giggled.
Mom, it's not funny. She tried to straighten it.
I know, sweetheart, I know. I don't want to wind up like Mrs. Lasky. You don't have to marry the boy, Juliana. How don't you just listen to what he has to say? And he sounded desperate to talk to you. What could he possibly have to say? He's already tried to blame Garrett for what he said about Uncle David. And I'm sorry, but I don't buy it. Yes, lied to me. He hasn't stood up for me. He's nobody that I want to like. I just need some time to get over all those years of hating Mike Tim. Mom sat there for the longest time, biting her cheek. Then she said, people do change. You know? Maybe he's had some revelation slating too. Frankly, any boy who tries to kiss a girl in front of a room full of other kids does not sound like a coward to me. Chef stroked my hair and whispered, maybe there's more to Bryce Loskafon, you know? Then she left me alone with my thoughts. My mother knew I needed time to think, but Bryce wouldn't leave me alone. Isle kept calling on the phone and knocking on the door. But if you were making 100 from next, I'm neat as 400 years, he discovered me. I knighted to recycling care and commit you. Was it so much to ask just to be left alone? Well, then this afternoon I was reading a book in the front room with the curtains drawn, hiding from him as I had all week, and I heard Analyze in the yard. And he was carrying a spade. What was he planning to do with that?
I flew off the couch and yanked open the door and ran right into me father. Stop him.
I cried. Calm down, Juliana, he said, and eased me back inside. I gave him permission. Permission. Permission to do what? I flew back to the window. He's digging a hole. That's right. I told him he could. But why? I think the boy has a very good idea. That's why. But it's not going to kill your grass, Juliana. Just let him do what he's come to do. But what is it? What's he doing? Watch. Watch. You'll figure it out. It was torture seeing him dig up my grass. The hole he was making was enormous. How could my father let him do this to my yard? Rice knew I was there too, because he looked at me once and nodded. No smile, no wave, just a nod. He dragged over some potting soil, pierced the bag with spade, and shoveled dirt into the hole. Then he disappeared. And when he came back, he wrestled a big burlap root ball across the lawn, the branches of a plant rustling back and forth as he moved. My dad joined me on the couch and peeked out the window too. A tree, I whispered. He's planting a tree. I'd help him, but he says he has to do this himself. Is it the words stuck in my throat. I didn't really need to ask though, and he knew he didn't need to answer. I could tell from the shape of the leaves, from the texture of the trunk. This was a sycamore tree. I flipped around on the couch and just sat. A sycamore tree. Bryce finished planting the tree, watered it, cleaned everything up, and then went home. And I just sat there, not knowing what to do.
I've been sitting here for hours now, just staring out the window at the tree. It may be little now, but it'll grow.
And 100 years from now, it'll reach clear over the rooftops. It'll be miles in the air. Already I can tell it's going to be an amazing, magnificent tree. And I can't help wondering, 100 years from now, will a kid climb it the way I climbed the one up on Collier Street? Will she see the things I did? Will she feel the way I did? Will it change her life the way it changed mine? I also can't stop wondering about Bryce. What has he been trying to tell me? What's he thinking about? I know he's home because he looks out his window from time to time. A little while ago, he put his hand up and waved, and I couldn't help it. I gave a little wave back. 1 second. So maybe I should go over there and thank him. For the trio, maybe we could sit on the porch and talk. It just occurred to me that in all the years we've known each other, we've never done that. Never really talked. Maybe my mother's right. Maybe there is more to Bryce Bastket than I know. Maybe it's time to meet him in the proper light.